Join Winnipeg Sports Talk, live from the NHL Draft in Nashville, presented by CoolBet, beginning on June 26th.
There is a lot surrounding Pierre-Luc Dubois, as well as a number of other Winnipeg Jets from a number of insiders, including our pal Frank Seravalli.
Before we get into the clips, should we play the...
We now have a Tristian Rivers original to get going with Dubois Drama until the drama is over.
Dubois Drama. What's for dinner? Who knows? But that's okay. Dubois Drama. Don't stress, it's only afternoon anyway. It's Dubois Drama lunch. Shaman goes through your shift with us.
Oh, God, that cracks me up. Tristian Rivers with the Winnipeg Sports Talk Dubois Drama theme. We've got a spinning logo now. We've got a theme. We've got a bunch of audio to play for you. And let's start it off with Elliotte Friedman because we had heard that the Los Angeles Kings were a team that was interested in. I mean, I had mentioned, a couple months ago on this program that, if you were going to trade a Scheifele or a Dubois, who would you be looking for? And I mean, what a younger player with potential that was under team control was a must. And the name Quinton Byfield came up, and it certainly sounds like there is a little more traction to that when you hear Elliotte Friedman weigh in on the situation as he did on 32 Thoughts. This is how it sounded.
So I have thought for a lot that Dubois was going to end up in Montreal.
Well, we all did.
And I don't think I'm alone here, but I know I've been very bold about it. My feeling on this, and this is the thing I'm always careful with, because as Isaiah Thomas once told me when I was starting out in the business, around the draft, everybody lies. Everybody has an agenda. And I'm always careful about this. But I think the Kings have made this interesting. One of the more recent podcasts, they said, I think they're in this. Mm-hmm. I think they've leaned in very hard. And I think that they've made it very clear to Winnipeg. If they haven't made an offer, they have basically let Winnipeg know we're in and we're willing to make this work. We'll see. Initially you talked about Rangers, Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're wrong. I'm not like trashing my co-host. I don't like that. But I think the Kings are very much in this now.
All right, so there's Elliotte Friedman. Earlier in the week, and we played this and talked about it, he did say that with the potential acquisition of Dubois, what that means for Quinton Byfield. And here's Jeff Merrick kind of responding to Elliotte on that topic of PLD.
I also put Tampa and Dallas in there too. You want to trash those two while you're at it, Elliotte?
No, but you also mentioned Colorado on a 1-year play.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's impossible, but I think we're going to let the Kings exhaust their possibilities here.
Yeah.
I think this is very real.
There you have it. As dialed in as anyone in the National Hockey League, Elliotte Friedman, with that report. And to be honest, Reem, I mean, again, from, a Jets perspective, for Jet fans, people that, want to see the best for this organization moving forward, this is exactly what I think we all hoped would come out of the report in The Athletic a week or two ago that Paterson was going to be involved. There would be 5 to 6 teams. A sign and trade deal would be on the table. More than just being forced to take whatever you can get from the Montreal Canadiens, which had been basically the assumed result of this, dating back to, the start of Dubois Drama about a year ago.
A bonus for the Jets to hear, that you could force a trade to a number of teams, and we'd speculated the Kings with their number of prospects and, just how close they are to competing for a Stanley Cup, missing a couple pieces. Are they missing the goaltender because they don't have one? Right now, Korpisalo is a free agent, and Dubois, who's represented by Paterson, and Dennis Bernstein was on yesterday mentioning his friendship with Luc Robitaille. There's a connection there. Could they broker some trade? They have all these prospects. The Jets, they could take on a guy like Quinton Byfield, and he could go into the lineup and play. Certainly interesting. So that was the rumor of the day here for Dubois Drama.
Well, and just wait. We've got some clips from Frank Seravalli. I mean, absolute fire from Frank on DFO yesterday. But just before we get to that, Pierre-LeBrun in The Athletic has his latest rumblings piece. And, with all this talk about Dubois potentially going to the King, Connor Hellebuyck was another guy that I think was front and center, of potential acquisitions for them at the goaltending position. Pierre has maybe put a bit of cold water on that about the need in goal. He said it's more likely the Kings go with the cheaper complement for Phoenix Copley because they're tight against the cap after the Vladislav Gavrikov extension. Gabe Vilardi, who's an RFA, needs to be re-signed, assuming he's not a part of some package going the other way. And then, he does mention about, potentially Laurent Brossoit maybe being a fit for the Kings if Vegas re-signs Adin Hill. Here's the key bit, though, about Hellebuyck, and I'll just read this from Pierre's column. One thing to remember about Hellebuyck, who's got 1 year left on his contract at $6.1 million AAV. Teams poking around on him understand that the goalies camp is looking for an Andrei Vasilevsky-esque money, $9.5 million AAV in an extension. And then he goes on to say he doesn't blame Hellebuyck's camp for wanting that, considering how he's played, but also wondered, after watching Adin Hill win the Cup the past week, what's the appetite to tie up that sort of money on a goaltender nowadays? That being said, you're getting the most consistent, one of, if not the most consistent goaltender who's done it over and over, game after game, year after year, and has been the workhorse of the National Hockey League over the last 6 years. But let's get to Frank. And Remo, you sent this to me last night. I had to listen to this a couple times. And folks, get on over to a Daily Face-Off. This was the DFO Rundown from yesterday. Frank Seravalli, maybe with some of the most pointed comments about the Winnipeg Jets situation that we've heard as of yet, and some really, as well as some interesting stuff on the Scheifele situation. But Remo, let's just get to three. Frank talked about, many people thinking that Cheveldayoff's hands were tied or this was a bad thing. There's also a major opportunity in the situation the Jets find themselves in right now.
Kevin Cheveldayoff, for the first time in 6 years, 8 years, whatever it's been, can sit at his desk these next 2 weeks and view the Jets franchise like Play-Doh and remold it and reshape it into something awesome. You've got the premier young center on the market in Pierre-Luc Dubois, the premier goaltender in Connor Hellebuyck, Mark Scheifele playing at a level that still vastly exceeds his cap hit. That's not woe is me. That's opportunity. Yeah. This is Jets 3.0.
All right. There's Frank with his take on the situation that the Jets find themselves in with Cheveldayoff. Now, many people will say, with all these players on the block, I mean, you can't move them all, can you? Frank says that you can.
Moving all four, Frank, in one summer would be
you
different.
have to.
You think you have to?
I don't know how you can piecemeal this together. Like, could the Jets go down the same path with Dubois that the Sens are with the Brinket? You could, but it'd be way easier to just rip the Band-Aid off and trade the player.
So there's Frank, a little bit more from the DFO Rundown with Jason Gregor yesterday. Now, there's been all sorts of speculation on Blake Wheeler's future. His spot within the club, losing the captaincy last year, what he had to say, sort of leading the charge of frustration at Rick Bonus's comments afterwards. And Frank maybe was some of the most pointed comments on the situation that the Winnipeg Jets find themselves in with their former captain. Here's Seravalli on the need to move on from Blake Wheeler.
Some of this is hearsay because I'm not there, but they made a decision to strip the C off of Blake Wheeler's jersey last fall before the season started. He didn't wear the C, but he still wielded significant influence over that team and their locker room. And I think in a negative way. I think you have to move on. And I don't want to say cancer, but you got to cut it out. You got to get rid of him. You cannot go through that again. This team needs to formally be turned over to the next wave of Connors and Wheeler and Marcy. You have to. Got to do it.
All right, so there's Frank. And it was interesting because we played yesterday, I believe, in Drager's conversation with Jay Onright on SportsCenter a couple nights ago after Vegas won the Cup. He did mention for the first time, I think, from Drager, who's very tightly connected to Cheveldayoff, that, a buyout is an option. And that, I know, is not something, the road that they wanted to go down right now, or ever, to be honest. But it might be something that has to happen. Now, there's one other clip here. I mean, we've spent so much time talking about Dubois for obvious reasons. Hellebuyck, Mark Scheifele's situation is sort of taken a little bit of a back seat, but it is still a major, major piece for the club and a major decision to be made moving forward. I have been of the opinion that I didn't think I think there was some realization within the organization that the time to move on was now with Mark Scheifele, and for many of the same reasons with Blake Wheeler. A fresh start elsewhere and a fresh start for the team probably makes a lot of sense. Frank dug in a little bit more, and I have a feeling, certainly from listening to Frank, that the feeling on that sounds like it's mutual. Here's Seravalli on Mark Scheifele's situation.
And then where does that leave Scheifele? Well, look, I think talks to this point have been amicable, and I did hear rumblings last week that the Jets were in a spot where Scheifele had asked for a trade. That's been met with some significant denials. But the point is, Mark Scheifele's, I don't think there's a path forward for him to re-sign there. So maybe you can bring him back and play out the year, and maybe things end up being different and you seize on the value that he has relative to cap. But I think the value is so much more in someone else's pocket than yours.
So there's Frank. And I mean, this is something that I've been saying for the better part of the last couple of years. This is an asset with an attractive contract that will bring back some significant assets to the Winnipeg Jets. We know that this team is not in a position to lose top players for nothing. And if it sounds like Scheifele's looking at greener pastures, if you will, after this contract is done, I guess, could you bring him back and trade him at the deadline at some point? Sure. I guess, could you bring him back and just let him play out the contract? You could, but I don't think that is in the best interest of the hockey club. And I'm sort of with Frank at this point, Remo. You can trade all these guys at once, and it is an incredible opportunity to completely remake and overhaul this Winnipeg Jets roster. And I think a lot of people would agree that the time for that is now.
Remold, remake, reshape, take your pick. But I really enjoyed hearing Frank's optimism on the situation that, hey, this is a great opportunity. You have players that other teams want to give up assets and it could be draft picks and young players for. I don't want to judge what they're going to do. We got to see what the return is. But that was the first that we had heard that Mark Scheifele reported he had heard about a trade request, but it was significantly denied. And look, I said to you before the start of the show, the Winnipeg Ice significantly denied any fines from the WHL. And look, they're on the move right now. They just got sold. So I don't know what that means from Frank, but he did say that he doesn't expect Scheifele to resign. And if they're not going to resign, then you need to. That was the most important. You need to get what you can, and you got to try to reshape this thing and bring back a different kind of culture for next season and a different group. You got a great opportunity ahead of you to do that.
Cheveldayoff and Larry Simmons did an incredible job of inking Mark Scheifele to that 8-year deal that became a real bargain. There's still 1 year left on that. It is still a bargain by his production. The end of the legacy of Mark Scheifele at some point here, people will remember fondly all the great things that he did in a Jet uniform, but also there's a potential for a significant return. And we certainly know that 40 goal scorers are in demand in the National Hockey League, especially when you can squeeze them into your cap at just over $6 million, at least for next season. And I think wherever Mark goes, assuming that there's not an extension as part of the deal, this is going to be a very motivated player to maybe restore some of his image and reputation around the league. And bottom line, play his ass off and have a great season and cash in for what will really be his last opportunity for a big money contract in the National Hockey League, whether it's as a UFA or whether it is with the team that he eventually ends up with if he is traded right now.